For years, Mitch McConnell, one of the greatest traitors to this country since Robert E. Lee, made it his mission to stack the Supreme Court with right wing hacks who would do the Republican Party's and, by extension, Donald Trump's bidding. This week, the expectation is that the corrupt, illegitimate supermajority Mitch McConnell so carefully constructed will once again do Donald a solid. NBC News reported that on Monday, Donald petitioned the court to overturn the verdict in writer E. Jean Carroll's case, along with the $5 million judgment the court ordered him to pay her. In 2023, a New York civil jury found Donald liable for sexually abusing, aka raping, E. Jean in a dressing room in 1996. He was also found to have defamed her in a 2022 post on his failing social media site. Donald has tried to have these decisions overturned repeatedly. Last year, a Second Circuit panel upheld the jury's verdict, so going to the Supreme Court is his last ditch effort. Just to be clear, this is a case the Supreme Court has no business taking up. But with the corrupt, illegitimate supermajority of this court, we don't know what's going to happen. The New York Times reviewed Donald's petition to the Supreme Court and found that Donald's team says the claims against him were, quote unquote, unplausible and unsubstantiated. They called the case, quote, liberal warfare, unquote. Well, if a jury of your peers comes back with such a verdict, it's very difficult to see how that is liberal warfare. The case was brought because, indeed, Donald did defame E. Jean Carroll. The case was brought because, indeed, according to this civil verdict, he was indeed found to have raped her as she claimed. So Donald's lawyers can lie all they want and in the process potentially continue to defame E. Jean Carroll. And it again just remains to be seen whether the Supreme Court will go against all precedent and take up what is, quite frankly, a case involving two individuals. Full disclosure, E. Jean Carroll is a very dear friend of mine, and it goes without saying that I believe her entirely, wholeheartedly, and undyingly. On Monday, the Supreme Court announced it will hear a case on mail-in ballots being brought by the Republican National Committee. This ruling could affect voters all over the country. The RNC is contesting a Mississippi law enacted during the pandemic to make voting safe. The National News Desk has details on the case here.
That Mississippi law allows ballots to be received up to 5 days late as long as they are postmarked by Election Day. The Republican National Committee, among others, are now deciding to sue, claiming that it violates a federal law that fixes the date for the election. Over a dozen states allow regular mail ballots to be accepted after Election Day, but most of the nation's battleground states, including Michigan, Pennsylvania, and even Wisconsin, require ballots to be received by Election Day. The Supreme Court agreeing today to decide whether or not states can continue counting mail-in ballots received after Election Day following that lawsuit from the RNC.
That's a bad sign. This is another case the Supreme Court should not take up. But let's just apply a little logic here. Voting day, that's the day that people need to cast their ballots. Even if you cast your ballot in person, that does not guarantee it will be counted that day. Sometimes because turnout is large and it takes a while. So why would it make a difference if you cast your ballot ahead of the election and your ballot is postmarked on the day other people vote in person, if that vote is counted after Election Day? It makes no sense at all because, quite frankly, you could cast a vote a month before the election, mail it out, and it still might get there after Election Day because things happen. There is literally no logical reason not to count votes as long as the envelopes are postmarked by Election Day, because that means that the person did what they were supposed to do: vote on or before Election Day. I also don't completely understand the Republicans' war on mail in balloting. I don't think it benefits Democrats any more than it benefits Republicans, except, of course, it makes voting easier, which is something Republicans reject out of hand. Now, obviously, mail in voting made a big difference during COVID, but we're not talking about that kind of situation anymore. So it remains to be seen what the Supreme Court does with this. And I think the bottom line here is not that mail in voting benefits one side or the other. It's that refusing to allow such ballots to be counted is just another way for this corrupt, illegitimate supermajority led by John Roberts, who has had his sights on voting rights in this country since the very beginning, will make it harder for more Americans to vote. Donald has tried to end mail-in ballot grace periods through executive orders twice, and twice he has been blocked by federal judges. Expanding voting options was until very recently a bipartisan effort, but NBC News points out that, quote, some Republicans have turned against it at the instigation of Donald, who has complained without evidence that allows for elections to be rigged, unquote, which is to say, elections he loses. Also, this week, the Trump regime asked the Supreme Court to block a judge's orders requiring them to divert emergency funding to operate food stamps. Funding for the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, referred to as SNAP, lapsed on November 1st because of the Republicans' government shutdown. But it also lapsed because Donald refused to tap into those emergency funds, failing to either recognize or concede that the fact that children were starving is an emergency. But before we go on, we here at Mary Trump Media will continue to put a spotlight on the egregious, corrupt, illegitimate supermajority of the Supreme Court and the many ways in which they continue to undermine our democracy in service of creating an imperial presidency. So please like and share this video. And if you believe in our mission, please subscribe to the Mary Trump Media channel. For procedural reasons, last week, Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson granted the stay and ordered the both parties to have their arguments ready by Sunday. And then the court decided yesterday to extend the temporary pause on the $4 billion in SNAP payments for November, which means that unless and until the government reopens, the Supreme Court has decided it is absolutely okay to let American children starve because that's what Donald Trump wants to have happen. By the way, last week, Donald was asked why he resisted using contingency funds to activate SNAP, and here's what he had to say.
And one other thing, our country has to remain very liquid because problems, catastrophes, wars, could be anything. We have to remain liquid. We can't give everything away based on a number. Here's an example. When I was president, the number that you're talking about was a tiny fraction of what it is now. Biden went totally crazy, gave it to anybody that would ask, gave it to people that were able-bodied, had no problem. Anybody that would ask, we get the number. And it's many times the number of people are on. This wasn't meant for that.
He's a total liar. 42 million Americans need SNAP benefits. 39% of those 42 million are children. And by the way, the United States needs to remain liquid. We're talking about $5 billion, which is less than Donald has grifted off of this country since getting back into office in January, first of all. Secondly, $5 billion. Yeah, it sounds like a lot of money to you and me, but it is a drop in the bucket. It is a rounding error when it comes to the entire budget of the United States of America, which in fiscal year 2025 is $7 trillion. This is posturing. This is simply because Donald has no boundaries. He will go as far as he needs to go to hurt as many people as he wants to hurt in order to make the other side cave. And sadly, it worked. I keep saying this. I am not sure when certain Democrats are going to start listening. When it comes to Donald Trump, there is no worst he will only get worse, more cruel, and more sociopathic. So let's stop pretending otherwise. Please take a second and like and share this video. It'd be awesome if you could subscribe to the channel. If you're listening to us in podcast form, please follow us and give the show a 5-star rating because it really does help other people find our content. Thanks.